But how is history actually used for politics? Well, often a person or group promotes specific interpretations of history over others, or actively suppresses uncomfortable historical facts and events. Both government and ordinary people play a role in this process of choice and interpretation. It happens constantly. This process is called memory politics. For example, in Poland, where Polish people are still trying to grapple with the painful past associated with the occupation of the Nazis and the Soviet Union. The current governing party, Law and Justice, has taken steps meant to embrace a specific controversial and contested patriotic vision. The country's leader have used Poland's memory of suffering and hardship to build their nationalist agenda and pursue political interests. This phenomenon is not unique to Poland, however, it happens all over Europe. In France, for instance, in the 1990s, the highest political authorities began for the first time to accept the responsibility for collaborating with the Nazis.
Ces heures noires souillent à jamais notre histoire.
The history of France continues to be portrayed as human progress and historical guardness, leaving out also questions of colonialism that are slowly being addressed in UK, Portugal, and Spain. Former US President Donald Trump is another example of memory politics in action. By claiming "Make America Great Again," he is implying that the country has failed and that it was greater in its past. This message creates a debatable expectation that returning to the past state would make things better. It aims to make some voters feel empowered. More worryingly, it invites racist ideas of white supremacy by claiming that a whiter, pre-racial America is superior, while deliberately ignoring the positive roles that people of color have always played in American society.
These instances of memory politics can be dangerous because they can get in the way of honest and open conversations about the past. Such conversations are one of the only ways to deal with past trauma. We see this in the US with the removal of Confederate statues, but it happens in Canada too. For instance, with the debates regarding the commemoration and statues of Sir John A. Macdonald.
Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister, was heavily involved in setting up the residential school system across the country. Because of his legacy, people now have started to interpret this figure as a wrongdoer. The discovery of the unmarked mass graves of Indigenous children at the sites of former residential schools forced the country to confront its colonial past more directly and openly. But the country is only at the beginning of this challenge and painful process. Canada struggles with the misconception which sees reconciliation as an end goal, when it is better understood as a permanent and ongoing transformative process. Jade Roberts, a First Nations Saskatoon educator, expressed this best when she said, "I want people to educate themselves and just to be listeners of our experience because they're valid. A lot of times we get kind of shrugged off like, it's happened a long time ago and it doesn't affect anyone anymore, but that is not the truth. Clearly, stories of the past can be manipulated and sometimes even misrepresented. Today, there are opportunities to make meaning of the past and learn from it. For instances, active remembrances can help society heal from the past injustices and create a roadmap for future of both political and historical landscapes. Most often, these acts of remembrance are symbolic. A memorable example specific to German history is the country's former Chancellor Willy Brandt falling on his knees at the former Warsaw Ghetto in 1970 to express his apology for the crimes of Nazis. Brandt said, "At the abyss of German history and under the burden of the murdered, I did what people do when the language fails." But increasingly, people and governments are calling for material representations for past injustices. While large-scale historical reparations are still extremely rare, in some places progress is being made. For instance, in Australia, the government has a subsidies program for Aboriginal communities called the Stolen Generation Reparations Scheme. Contemporary discussions about history acknowledge a spectrum of perspectives that are integrated into its stories and examples. Addressing history can spark controversy, but it is also an avenue to collectively work towards a more hopeful and peaceful future.
We invite you to join the conversation on global topics such as commemorating past injustices, immigration, and historical memory,
democracy, right-wing populism and nationalism, as well as why European history matters in the Canadian context.